on that journey of all those wonderful things that she read. I first encountered Shannon in the amazing work she's doing with Shabaha at one of the Digital Undivided events when she was named Cosmopolitan something amazing. Something amazing Cosmopolitan having to do with women of color and entrepreneurship, and to see this manifestation, the Diversitech conference, of everything that she and her team have been working on is just so energizing. So everybody, congratulations on being those who came to the very first session. It means you didn't party too hard last night, or that you are one of the strong, which I'm looking at the eyes so I can tell who's who, but I won't tell you. It's also really an honor to introduce this first panel because it's something that I've struggled with. And it's interesting because when we were in the back room talking about this issue, a question came up that a number of you took a poll on, and that's, have you been discriminated upon because of your hair? And my initial gut answer was, no, I don't remember anything like that. I don't think so. And then, as we talked, it all started to come back to me. It all started to come back to me, the stories of people saying little microaggressive things like, oh, your hair, it looks so good long, you should wear it long. And we actually block out a lot of those traumas. So in order to be our truest selves, we have to work through them. And that's what we're going to do in this amazing session we have this morning. The professional persona, unpacking hair discrimination and professionalism in the workplace. And I'm so excited to introduce you to an amazing panel who is going to wrap our heads around this issue, no pun intended. So first up, we have our moderator, Dr. Lisa Marie Lee. Welcome to the stage. Please celebrate Dr. Lisa. And I have it on good authority that she wears fascinators all the time, not at all an honor of the coronation. Hello. Thank you, Dr. Lisa. We have Nicol, Varona, Cancelmo, an amazing hair entrepreneur.
Buenos dias, good morning.
We have Willena. And we have one of my favorite LinkedIn buddies, Janice, Gassam, Asare. So without further ado, I leave you in the hands of these experts.
All right, let's get started. I'm going to check the poll, the question that I had asked to see if there's any changes as far as regarding, has anyone experienced hair discrimination? So 1 second. All right, we've got 36 responses. And of the 36, about 50% have either experienced hair discrimination or have not experienced hair discrimination. So we're going to unpack that. Maybe as we spoke of earlier, some people may have not realized that they may not recognize that they've experienced hair discrimination. So as we unpack this, we'll see if this changes. So if anyone wants to go back and change as we go through the discussion, I'll check it in the end. All right, I'm going to open up the panel and begin with question 1. And I'm going to start with Dr. Janice. All right. How has hair discrimination impacted your personal and professional experience?
That's a great question. Hi, everyone. I love this topic, so I'm so excited for us to unpack this. There's so many ways that I like thinking back now, looking back at my life, hair discrimination has impacted me. I think as someone who has 4C hair and who, no matter how hard I try, my edges never really lay the way that I want them to, I've gone through a lot of different hair experiences, right? I never used to wear my hair out. I used to straighteners in my hair throughout school and college, and I know many of us can relate to that. So I never really dealt with my hair, and it wasn't until the pandemic when the girl that I would go to get my hair braided and done, that I couldn't go to her anymore, that I had to figure out what to do with my hair. And even when I was teaching, we would have these like after hours meetings with a group of faculty members, and it was like, can I show up to this call with a turban? Is that like professional? But my hair's not done, and I ended up showing up with the turban, but hair discrimination has shown up in so many different ways throughout my life, and I think like it was mentioned, like Lola mentioned, like when you really think about all of the ways that people have treated us differently, there are so many things that we've sort of blocked out. And I remember one particular incident where when I moved to New York, I was like a tour guide. So I would go, and there was a double-decker bus that I would be on, and we had a uniform, and it was so fun because I'm not from New York, so I got to kind of like learn New York, show people what New York was like, and part of the uniform involved wearing a hat. And my hair didn't fit the hat, so I just kind of remixed the hat and did my own thing. And the manager one day commented about why I wasn't wearing the hat, and she's like, why aren't you wearing the uniform? And I'm like, my hair doesn't fit in the hat. And she's like, make it work. And it's like getting reprimanded in front of other coworkers because I'm not complying with the uniform, but the uniform wasn't made with someone like me in mind. So like that's one of the most vivid and recent memories that I can remember, but my sister and I used to get made fun of for the 90s kids. You may remember like Chia Pets. And there was this boy in our school who used to like call us Chia Pets, and he used to sing the song. Chia Pets, for those of you who don't know, are like little bonsai trees that were really popular in the 90s, and you could shape them into different things. And so just remembering those sort of, having those memories, I think many of us have stories like that where it's just like hair has played such a critical and vital part in our lives, even from like, can I go into work with hair in this particular way, or even your headshots. So I think there's so many ways that it's shown up for me.
Nicole, would you like to follow up with that?
Sure. Good morning, everybody. So in my case, it was very personal. If you guys are familiar with the term, if you speak Spanish, if you're familiar with the term pelo malo, which means bad hair, we grew up with that mentality. I'm originally from the Dominican Republic, and so when I moved to the U.S., hi, Dominicanas in the house. So when I moved to the U.S., you come with that, societal pressure and stereotype that, already you have bad hair. And that's like what people like normally would like tell you, like, oh, your hair is too big or too frizzy or whatever. So like you already grow up with that, stereotype that your hair's bad. And like, why would you say that to a kid? Like, it's traumatizing. So for us, now my sister and I own a hair care company, a brand that promotes confidence in wearing your natural hair, your curly hair, wavy, whatever it is, coily. So to me, it's like important to kind of help the future generation understand that there's nothing wrong with your hair, the way that it grows, and you should not have to change anything about it to feel confident. And so for us, is growing this brand to help others and to also kind of change the way that the professional, workplace is seen. Like, we're building a brand that we would allow anybody to show up however they want, because that's the only way that you're going to bring your true self to work or anything that you do. So it's just changing that stereotype and just, helping a lot of Latinas and Latinos specifically, like, because we feel like that's still lacking in our culture, is the fact that we still, reference, the pelo malo, and like even if you're going to work or to a wedding or to a party, we felt like you have to change your natural hair to fit in, and that's definitely what we're trying to change and help other women feel confident in their own natural beauty.
Woo! Willena, I would like to hear your experience as well. For me, to your point, right, I still have smell traumas. I can smell a box perm a mile away. So, growing up where, I guess you could say the word conditioned to think beauty is straight hair. And growing up in a school that didn't have a whole lot of diversity, there was a piece where you don't see yourself in places of power. And if you're trying to mimic, as a child, you want to mimic what success looks like unintentionally. And so there was definitely pieces where you're dumbing your hair down it has to look a certain way. It must have a pound of gel so that it doesn't become unruly and inappropriate in the workplace. So definitely have experienced that from childhood up until adult life, where I finally realized I do not have to have this crack, as they call it, in order to be presentable. I can wear my hair as I choose to. I can be who I choose to be, as long as I'm comfortable in my own skin. So yes.
Yes, well said. Okay, for question 2, how can leadership and HR professionals create a more inclusive environment that promotes diversity in appearance, which also includes hairstyles? I would like to start with you, Dr. Janice, and then Willena, and follow up with Nicol. Yeah, I think such a great question, because if people don't feel comfortable showing up to the workplace with their natural hair, if they don't see it being modeled by leaders, they're not going to. So I think that you have to first look at policies, right? And policies that on the surface seem really benign could, when you peel back the layers, be discriminatory. So I think the policy that I gave the example of, where it's uniforms, right? If you have a company where you have to wear a uniform, you have to wear a hat, is it inclusive of people who have different hair textures, right? Is it inclusive of someone who wears a hijab, for example? Like, you have to think beyond what is in the policy. So I think having someone come and review the policies is really powerful, because there could be things that you're doing in your workplace that you don't really realize is discriminatory against particular groups. So policies is really powerful, and I think as a leader, like for me, when I was teaching, I would show up to the classroom with all kinds of styles, right? And I know that for many of my students, I'm the first Black woman professor that they've had. So them seeing me in my full and authentic self is really, really powerful. So even when it comes to like my headshot on LinkedIn, I try to make sure that I have my 4C hair out in that headshot, so that when people see me or they're trying to look me up, they're like, they feel comfortable, like you said, to know that they can see it in me. So I think seeing that model by leaders is really, really powerful. And then also providing leaders with that education. There was someone that I spoke with who was saying that she was on a virtual call with her manager. This was a Black woman, and she said that her manager, who is a man who's from India, made a comment about her hair and said, make sure that when you're meeting the clients, your hair looks presentable. Cultural understanding to know that Black people's hair has been policed since forever. So I think like that education piece isn't always there. People don't understand hair discrimination. When I talk about it on LinkedIn, there's a lot of people in the comments who are like, this doesn't happen. Why are you talking about hair? It's not a big deal, right? And so people don't understand that just because it hasn't happened to you doesn't mean that it's a very real experience. So I think the first really important piece is just like education and having conversations like this, bringing these types of conversations to the workplace is so important, as well as like reviewing the policies and making sure that there are no policies that are disparately impacting certain communities of people.
I love that. I think another piece to add is that it's also really key to like new hire paperwork or new hire onboarding, for example. How many times do you see graphics and they're mostly people you don't recognize, you know what I mean? Or if you see someone you recognize, they're not in their natural form. They've confined to look a different way. So I think as leaders, it is also our responsibility to ensure that people see themselves in all capacities, especially when you're inviting a new person into an organization. You want to ensure that all of the materials that you're presenting to the new employee population is inclusive to different people, whether it's wearing certain headscarves or head clothings or fros or whatever it is that everyone can feel invited. So I think that's really important as well.
Yeah, totally agree. And I think as far as the education, starting obviously young with younger kids, also kind of including that in the conversations. And I think one thing that we don't talk enough about is that there is, also laws that help you. Like the Crown Act is something that we should all know about. It's creating a respectful, open world for natural hair, I think is what Crown stands for. you guys can look it up. I know it's law in Philadelphia, but in Pennsylvania overall as a state, I think they're still working through it, and there's 20 states that it's a law, but 30 states that still need to be, it has to pass. So something like that where you know that you are protected, depending on what state you're in, and also being educated and bringing it to the workplace. So that they know that, even though it shouldn't be a law, like it should be, common sense that you don't have to change who you are. You still are protected in certain ways so that, you shouldn't feel like you are being discriminated against just because of the way your hair looks.
Yes. Well said, ladies. Our next question will focus on the role and how do companies' dress codes play in perpetuating discrimination. I know we pretty much spoke on that, but if we could get a little more in depth with it, and how can they be reevaluated to create a more inclusive workspace? Willena, I would like to start with you, and then Dr. Janice, and then follow up with Nicol. Thank you.
I think it's more so important to identify the impact that any policies are going to have on your employees. When were these policies created? We have older organizations that have been around 50, 60, 100 years, and the community has changed. I worked at a company that was kind of the good old boys type of organization, and it was, you couldn't have tattoos, you couldn't have nose piercings, you can't have your hair looking different colors that aren't natural form colors. That's not reality anymore. When I got into the tech space many years ago, it was really the first opportunity I saw where tech people really weren't as stuffy as I thought. In a sense, engineers are typically edgy, and in some cases, in my experience, are edgy and have different looks and appearances and things like that. But again, it's still when I'm trying to find myself in the population amongst the thousands of people, companies that I've worked at, how do you see you? How can I find myself? And so we want to make sure that even if you think it's not that big a deal to what you mentioned earlier in terms of, is hair really that big a deal? Yes, it is. And if you don't have any policy around it, you might as well add to it. So I think it's time to look forward and look ahead at what people need to see and experience and ensure that everyone feels included and seen in the workplace.
Yeah, totally agree. I think you guys said it all. It's that. I think for me, when I started in the professional corporate world, I still have a full-time job, and I also have a hair care company that we're growing now. But starting off and always showing up to work with straightened hair, nobody knew what my hair looked like, and then I finally wore it naturally curly the one day, and somebody was like, "Oh, your hair's really nice, it's pretty," and I didn't even believe it myself. So sometimes it takes other people also to kind of say it's okay, you can be yourself here. And even seeing the first headshot that I took at work, and then finally looking at it now, I have my curly hair everywhere I go, and I wore it to my wedding. It's just the way that my life is now. And so it's very different. You can go through this big transformation even at work, and showing up as yourself. Maybe sometimes you're scared to do it, but it's actually something that some people actually love. So you don't know that until you actually show up as yourself. And I think that's the message that we're trying to do with the company. It's bringing that confidence so that you can feel like you can be yourself wherever you are.
Yeah, and I think looking at your company culture is really important, right? Attorney Leah Goodrich, some of you may follow her on LinkedIn. She wrote this really powerful article. I believe it was for the UCLA Law Review, but I could be wrong. She wrote a really powerful piece called How Professionalism is Used as a Racial Construct, right? And so how people have this idea and this conception of professionalism, and it's often based on white-centered and Eurocentric standards, and how we really need to reevaluate what we even mean or what professionalism is. I think when we think about what is professional, we all have an idea and a conception in our mind of what that is and what that looks like, and it doesn't look like any of us, right? And so I think that really evaluating company culture and are you sort of in different ways insinuating that straight hair is better by those comments, right? I think I've heard that before where people said, oh, your hair looks so nice when it's straight, right? And those like sort of subtle comments which signal to me that like when I come to work or when I come into these environments and I don't have straight hair, what does that mean, right? So I think that really thinking about professionalism and how we conceptualize that and what that means in the workplace is important. And then if there are like certain policies of how you, appearance policies or look policies in the workplace, how you should look, how important it is to reevaluate those, because oftentimes it's discriminatory against people's hair, people's features, people's skin color. So I think just thinking about that is really important.
Lovely. My next question is, how can individuals who have experienced hair discrimination in the workplace advocate for themselves and affect change? And I would like to have Willena open up and then follow Nicol and then again, Janice.
I think it starts obviously with yourself. Something you just mentioned helped me remind me. So imagine some of your parents, or you know parents who have children, and during picture day, it's a really big deal in the any community really, right? But in the Black community, it's a big thing because the night before your hair's got to be done and prepped and ready. You gotta have, I don't know if y'all have had to sleep with rollers in your hair the night before church. You gotta sleep a certain way and all this and that, right? But it creates a unconscious bias within ourselves when we think about what does beauty look like before the big day. And sometimes that's getting your hair pressed. Sometimes that's getting braids and extensions. But at what point are we acknowledging in our most authentic form, are we beautiful? And so that's really important too when we're looking to advocate. To your point as well, like, oh girl, your hair is long. You know, for me, wearing my natural hair today is like the biggest. I've never been on a stage in my natural hair form. I always have extensions or braids or something that gives me some length, right, to change my appearance or to improve my appearance, so I think, right? But I am beautiful regardless in my most authentic self, right? And we, as peers and colleagues and friends and family, we need to embrace and encourage people, to your point, like, do I look good with curly hair? Do I look good with short hair? Does it have to be down my back and, you know, for you to think that I am beautiful? So change starts with, one, believing in ourselves, but also encouraging a person that we don't know in front of us to say, hey, you are beautiful in just the way that you are, right? So that goes a long way. So I think that's the one thing to start that we could definitely do to impact change.
Absolutely. Definitely starts with self-awareness. It was a transformation for me and my sister who did our journey together. That took like over a year for me to finally look in the mirror and say, oh wow, I'm beautiful with my curly hair. And I don't have to change anything about it. And now that I have kids, I'm instilling that confidence in them. And just the way that you explained, you know, I don't have to change my daughter's hair to go to picture day, the way that my mom used to do it to me. And just because she didn't know better. So it's like, how is she going to pass that on to me if she didn't know how to do her hair the way that it was herself? And now I like pride myself in that I can do my daughter's hair the way that it is, curly. She knows that she doesn't have to change it to feel beautiful or to show up to picture day. So I think it definitely starts with, you know, us with self-awareness and also passing it down to others, like other family members. Like, I remember, like, this is not the workplace, but in Dominican culture, it's like the wedding is like a big deal, right? It's like a big thing in your life. And I told my mom that I was going to wear my hair curly to my wedding. She's like, are you sure? I'm like, yes, I'm going to do it. I feel confident in my own skin, the way that it is in my hair. I don't have to change it. So just showing that, you know, you can go out there and own it and be yourself, and that can also motivate others to be themselves.
Yeah, I think all of what people said is so important. So like people, you don't know how powerful that is, and I'm sure that there are other Dominican people who saw your wedding pictures on, you know, you posted them on social media, and they were like, wow, like that's awesome that she did that. I can do that too. So I think even seeing ourselves as the change and showing up in spaces and being authentic, people see that, and it makes people feel like they have permission to be their authentic selves too. So I think even like the headshots is so important, and I love when I'm like scrolling through LinkedIn and I see people with their natural hair or with their natural curls, and they're like, this is my first time rocking my hair natural. I think that's so beautiful and so powerful. I had a friend recently tell me, she works at a law firm, she's an attorney, and she's like, she changed her hairstyle for her company's photos. And I was like, why? She was like, girl, I'm the only black person there. I didn't want to be like too black, right? And that's what she said, and I like struggled with that so much because that was her reality and that's her experience and that's not my experience. So I can't be like, you know, why did you? But I think it would have been so powerful for her to show up to that, you know, to that photo with her natural hair, and for her colleagues and her coworkers to see that, because I think that our hair has to be normalized, and that's really important. So I think that showing up as our authentic selves is so important, and even what we're teaching our kids, I think making sure that the imagery that kids see is imagery that is affirming, looking for books that showcase natural hair. I know there's many that are coming up now, because that it starts so early. When we think of all of us here, think about when we first learned to recognize that parts of our hair weren't acceptable. It was probably something someone said to us when we were really young, and we've internalized that. So I think giving yourself permission to show up in your natural hair with your authentic self is really powerful.
Yes, so true. Okay, next question. What can allies do to support colleagues who have experienced hair discrimination and to help create a more inclusive work culture? And I'd like to start with Nicole, and then you, Dr. Janice, and then follow up with Willena. Thank you.
I mean, I think it's community, right? It's how we define it for our brand is, the sisterhood. We're all in this together. You can learn as you go. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a process, and you remember that you have those sisters, your cousins, your friends that turn into even, feeling like your family now, because you're going through that journey together. So I think it's just finding your tribe, trabaja, right? And so those people that can support you. Sometimes it's not your family, because they don't know better, and you have to show up as yourself so that they can also see it's okay, and you're allowed, and you shouldn't even have to ask for permission. It should just be the way that we, know to act and just to be, because this is just the way we are, and we shouldn't have to change it.
Yeah, I think it's really important for allies, when they recognize that this problem exists, to push back when they hear comments about people's hair, right? I had a conversation with someone years ago, and they were talking about Beyonce, and they were like, I didn't know Beyonce had nappy hair. And the person who said it wasn't black, and that just rubbed me the wrong way, right? And so we had a whole conversation on Beyonce's hair, why you can't use the term nappy, why it's problematic. And so I think that when you're in those situations where you hear someone saying something that's problematic, it's important to stop the conversation right then. So anyone who recognizes hair discrimination, and they're in a conversation where someone is having a conversation about how someone's hair isn't presentable. I hear that a lot where people on the radio, for example, or people are giving commentary and they might be talking about other celebrities, right? I think you see a pattern for me a lot. Like I talked on LinkedIn about this, how like a lot of people were talking about Simone Biles' hair at her wedding, and how her edges weren't laid. And as a person whose edges are never fully laid, I sympathize with that experience. And so I think if someone is seeing that conversation taking place, really intervening. And I think it's also important when we have this conversation to talk about texturism, right? So texturism is like this hair hierarchy where when we talk about natural hair, it's really important that we're prioritizing and centering those who are most impacted by hair discrimination. And I think that sometimes these conversations miss that piece, right? So when we talk about racism, it's important to talk about things like colorism and how darker skinned people are most impacted, right, by the severest forms of marginalization. So when we talk about hair discrimination, we have to make sure we're including texturism. What does that look like? Well, it looks like someone with looser curls may be prioritized over someone with kinkier and more tighter curls, right? And so for me, this has shown up in weird ways where I'm on like some BuzzFeed list, so they send and they're like, we want people with type 3 hair only, right? So that's essentially like curly hair, but like not too curly. So I wrote back this whole long email, and of course no one responded. But it's just like moments like that where you have an opportunity to call out hair discrimination and texturism when it happens. And I think making sure that we're taking advantage of those opportunities is really important.
Yeah, I mean, not much more to add after that. I think it's key. One, please don't ask to touch it. Okay, don't. I won't touch your hair. You don't need to touch mine. Okay. But to your point, I mean, allyship means inclusiveness. It means, if you see something, say something. Don't just be like, oh, okay, mind my bag and my business. If you see something, say something, and be a part of the change that you want to see. So.
The last, can you hear me? Thank you.
All right, and for the next question, I'm going to focus on any best practices or success stories from companies that have actively worked to address hair discrimination in the workplace. And I want to start it off with Nicol, and then Willena, and follow up with Dr. Janice.
Let's see. I don't know any examples of other companies, but I think again it's just finding those people at the workplace that you can talk to, and maybe you guys can start something like an ERG group or something for resources for others, right? So again, if you don't see it, do it yourself. Start it, and so that you can motivate others to also take part of it. And you have to do it together. Like if one person can motivate another person, that's already two people doing it at the same company. So maybe it starts with you. Like you have to be the person leading it. So again, be the change you want to see.
I agree. To your point earlier about the Crown Act, I think that's an example of what organizations can utilize as a blueprint somewhat, a starting point to say, even if the state does not, or your city is not requiring it, you can be an advocate even if you're not in a place of power. Your company town hall, you can speak up to your CEO and say, hey, this is something that is important. I think it's something we should consider to implement inside of our organization, and watch it happen. What are they going to say? No? They're going to get sued real fast, right? So, use your voice for positive and for change, because impact will be faster than you imagine if you just speak up.
Yeah, and one thing I saw that I thought was so powerful during Black History Month is this company, and I'll name them because I thought it was amazing. If anyone has heard of the company REI, it's like an outdoor brand. I wasn't really familiar with them, but I actually live near one, which is random. But they invited me to facilitate a conversation on hair discrimination. So they asked their Black women employees if they, whoever wanted to share, and they had a panel of 3 women, and they had a conversation, and they opened it up to the entire company, and they talked about their experiences, like we were talking about on this panel, with hair discrimination, and then specifically at work. And because this is an outdoor company, one of the women talked about how she didn't feel comfortable going bike riding because she couldn't find a helmet that fit her hair, right? And so things like that. And the feedback that I was reading the feedback after the panel, and it was really powerful to see what people were saying, because that panel was so affirming for the other Black women at the company and for the Black people in general, but for the people that didn't understand hair discrimination, I think it gave them a unique insight into what their colleagues were going through. So I just felt like more of those types of conversations could be happening in the workplace, where a lot of people feel comfortable sharing their experiences with hair discrimination. And so I think more companies need to be having those sorts of discussions. All right, we have some more time, so I was able to go through the audience questions. So I want to start with, I have 2 that I think we didn't really touch on through the questions that we asked. And the first one is, what steps should be taken when encountering hair discrimination? And I'm going to combine it with another question. So whether this discrimination isn't overt, but passive aggressive. So what steps should someone take? And I'd like to start with Willena and then
So your question is, if we witness passive aggressive?
If someone's experienced it. So if they've
Oh, like-
experienced it, what steps should they take, whether it's passive aggressive or
If you have experienced it or you're currently experiencing it, I think to the point, right? Like, okay, well maybe we need to have some policies around this. It's crazy to say, hey, I need a policy to tell you to tell me I can wear my hair the way it comes out of my scalp, but here we are, right? So I think that would be the best thing to do if you're experiencing it right now in your organization. For example, this is actually a question I received from my clients as a career coach. It's something where, hey, I'm going into an interview for the first time with this organization. How should I show up, right? We talk about, at least business on the top, right? For these Zoom interviews that you're experiencing, a suit or a button-up or whatever the case may be. But what do I do with my hair? How do I present myself to strangers for a job interview when people imply, like, if I'm wearing a fro, I must be a part of the Black Panther Party or something? That's not a thing. I still think that regardless, do you even want to work for a company that makes you feel unwelcome? Yeah, bills need to be paid, but you're important inside and out, and if you don't feel welcomed from a culture perspective, you got to draw a line in the sand and say that's a deal breaker. And if I can't come in and be myself, that's not okay. So I think from a company perspective, I think the main thing would be to try and change policies around what's expected.
Yeah, totally agree. And I would say maybe the first step would be talk to HR, like talk to somebody who you feel, comfortable enough to bring that up. Like, you should speak up definitely. And then if nothing's done about it, then you should definitely weigh your pros and cons, and maybe you should, be looking at a different company, like where your values are seen as very important, because they should be. And so I would think reevaluate where you are, and maybe this is a step for you to maybe go somewhere else where you feel welcome, like you just said. So I think definitely talk to HR first, and then something should be done about it so that other people don't face the same challenge.
Yeah, and I would say an important thing is to look to see whether you're actually in a Crown Act state. So there are, I think, 20 states where the law in the state is protected, providing protections against race-based hair discrimination. So I think, are you in a Crown Act state, yes or no? If you are in a Crown Act state, there are resources that are available. There are attorneys and lawyers that can work on your behalf and help you. If you're not, I still think, like you said, it's important to bring it up to HR, but also recognize that this might be the beginning of the end, because I know there's so many stories of women who have been asked to change their hairstyle because of the company policy, and they end up having to sue the organization or, leave the organization ultimately. So I think you also have to recognize, like, what the next steps could be, and it could be you exiting the company and maybe not in the best way. So you have to kind of weigh the pros and cons. But I think the first thing is looking at whether you're actually in a state where that type of discrimination is protected.
And can I just add, document. If you're experiencing that, write it down. What date did it happen? Who said it? Was there some witnesses around? So make sure you document it as well.
Excellent. Okay, this question is, I really like this one. This kind of follows up with what we're just speaking about. When working remotely, do you think it's necessary to warn folks you're not coming on camera because your hair isn't done, wrapped, or on it, etc.? Start with you, Nicol, Willena, and follow up with Dr. Janice.
I think that's very personal. I mean, I don't know what to say to somebody like with that question. I think it's your choice. Again, self-awareness. I don't come on camera when, I don't feel comfortable that day, or if I'm, maybe I'm dealing with kids that are at home, so it just depends on your situation. But I think if you know your coworkers and you feel comfortable enough, like, it's just the way the culture is at your company. Like, if you're, you should feel comfortable enough to come on camera however you are, even if it's on Zoom, right? So I don't think, again, like, it depends on the situation. I guess if I don't know what your personal, how you feel that day or however. I mean, I don't think you should have to warn anybody. It's just depending on your choice. Like yes or no. If I feel comfortable enough to show up today and turn my camera on, I'm just gonna do it. If I don't feel comfortable, I won't.
I think it also depends, I guess, if it's like a one-on-one versus a group. A group, they may not notice as much. A one-on-one, obviously, if the person is staring back at themselves, they're going to notice. But you can essentially just say, I'm not coming on camera today. So this is the agenda. You don't have to make a big deal out of things that aren't a big deal. Like, if you know it's not, like, I just got out of bed and no, I just don't want to show you what I look like right now. There shouldn't be a big, like, talk about, today I just didn't have time to do all of these things versus I'm not going to be on camera today. Let's get started with the agenda and just keep moving forward.
Yeah, I think ideally, like you said, I would love to be in an environment where I could just not show up. You know, if I don't feel like turning my camera on, but I think the reality is not all of us are in those environments. And also, you know, a friend and I had a whole conversation about how she thought it was inappropriate that she's a manager at a telehealth company. She thought it was inappropriate that one of her team members showed up to a call getting braids. And I was like, why is that inappropriate? Do you know how long braids take? I was just like, you lose a whole day of work. And she's like, oh, well, she's not wearing headphones. And it's like, what is it called when you can't tell people's medical stuff? There's a term for it. Yeah, there is a HIPAA violation, exactly. So she was like, that was more of her issue, but in the beginning it sounded a little bit like it was what she was doing, right? And so I was like, well, yeah, I think she should have been wearing headphones and kept the camera off. But I think like understanding those types of things, right, and not like questioning people who don't have their cameras on. It's important as a manager or as a leader to have that flexibility. And if people are like, my camera's not going to be on today, not really probing deeper, because if you say, oh, we're an inclusive company, then I don't think that you should be like interrogating people about why they decide not to put their camera on or not. And I even think like, why do we really need our cameras on in this conversation? Is it like absolutely necessary, especially if you're having meetings that are where people are in different time zones? If I'm like, it's 9 p.m. my time, right, or 8 p.m. my time, I might have a bonnet on, or I might have my hair wrapped, right? So it's like, I think really like making sure that if you say you're inclusive, you're really flexible and give people the flexibility to show up and turn their cameras on or not turn their cameras on. Thank you. How many minutes do we have left? About 5? Okay. It was one other question. It kind of doesn't really relate to hair discrimination, but I thought it was important because it was asked, and we can see how we can answer it. What are other issues similar to hair discrimination to be wary of and to try to combat at the workplace? Now, we got started with Dr. Janice and Willena, and then Nicol. Thank you. I would definitely say colorism, right? I think that when you think about inequity and racism, it's like the trifecta. It's like texturism, featurism, and colorism. So even looking at like the role that colorism plays and whether there are darker skinned people in the company who are advancing at the same rates, right? There was a study that was just done by, what is the name? The company that does a lot of studies on women's stuff in the workplace, and the name is not Lean, the other one. Not McKinsey, not Chief. Catalyst, yes, thank you. Catalyst just did a study a couple months ago, and they looked at like women's workplace experiences, and they found that colorism was an issue, texturism was an issue, and so I don't think we have enough conversations. I think we're still at the level where people are trying to understand racism. We don't talk about anti-Blackness. We don't talk about those sorts of things. So I think like colorism is a really, really big issue we don't talk enough about. And for anyone doing like equity work in organizations, it should be part of the conversation because it's not just an issue within the Black community. Every community of color, colorism is an issue, right? So like I think it's definitely colorism for me.
I would agree with that. I think it's also a effect of that causes people of color to show up more meek. And what I mean by that is when you're getting job offers, when you're getting promoted, you accept. Okay, yes, I'll accept the job. when you've left $20,000-$30,000 on the table because you don't want to seem like the angry black person who pushed back when your counterparts are definitely pushing back. They're definitely negotiating. That's expected. I've been in the talent acquisition space for over 10 years now. It's expected. We want you to push back. There's room, probably, even if we don't tell you, there's certain room to negotiate the offer. Obviously, we have to go through the approval process and all that. But I think the African American community, or diverse community in general as a whole, has this block in some cases where they don't feel they have the permission to ask for more. And so I encourage you, when you leave here today, that whatever job you're at, is there room for more? Are you giving more than you're getting paid for? In a lot of cases, you probably are underpaid, unfortunately. If you have not heard that, I'm here to tell you it's very likely that you're underpaid. So please take everything that you're learning from the speakers today and apply that immediately for more opportunities to give more, to do more, to be more for your professional lives.
Yeah, I completely agree, and I think also like the benefits too, like of being in the company, like the add-ons, like what else can they, provide to support you? Like again, these ERG groups that, to find other people like you who can help motivate others or help others in different ways. Time off or, certain things that, working parents, like something to help you with childcare, things like that, like the add-ons, the benefits, look into those things to make sure that you're getting supported the right way.
All right, and I'll follow up with another look at the poll. So we got 43 responses, and for those that just walked in and may not have done the poll, I did ask a question on how has anyone experienced hair discrimination, and the 43 people, 21 people said that they did experience hair discrimination, and 22 said no, so we're still at about 50. Okay, and thank you everyone for joining us. It was awesome.